Now, just because we have been making a bunch of videos about the 2026 men's ice hockey tournament at the Olympics does not mean we are going to go out there and ignore the rumors, the updates, the speculation around the National Hockey League. Because when it comes to one of the biggest names on the trade market, a guy who once upon a time was an Olympian, Justin Faulk of the St. Louis Blues, we had ourselves some extended word and some brand new updates as to what his trade situation could actually be looking like. Now, Justin Faulk, just in case you needed the refresher, because I know all eyes have been on the Olympic tournament. The men's tournament does not have any games today. The women's tournament, actually, the bronze and gold medal games are going to be taking place this morning, but we haven't really been covering too much of that because I'm really just not educated enough on the women's game to be able to provide thoughtful commentary on what goes on. But when it comes to some of the folks in the National Hockey League, Justin Faulk is a name that we should probably be discussing due to the potential of his NHL future taking place somewhere else other than St. Louis. And yeah, by the way, Justin Faulk was an Olympian. He made Team USA back in 2013-14. In this time frame, he was only 21 years old, and it was kind of interesting to see a guy so young end up making that Olympic squad. He didn't score any points, but the fact that he was on the team in the first place was already a pretty notable feat. Justin Faulk today is 33 years old, 6 feet 216 right-handed guy, signed on till the end of 2027, making $6.5 million a year. We all recognize the good and the bad of Faulk's game. At his best, he is a 50-point NHL producer who could go out there with some very solid goal-scoring and power play quarterbacking ability to help out whichever team needs support on their man advantage. This season, though, Faulk has 30 points in 57 games played. He is on pace for 43 points over 82, which is admittedly better than some of the previous few years that he has had, despite the fact that the St. Louis Blues are really not all too great this year. So, Justin Faulk, on a bad team, has a $6.5 million deal that expires next season, so he could be seen as a 1-year-plus rental option for a team looking to make a splash in the playoffs. That is exactly why, if we head over to Spectors Hockey from earlier yesterday, Feb 18th, there is a brand new summary posted about in regards to the future of Justin Faulk. I'll leave a link in the description to the Spectors Hockey article. I like what Lyle Richardson does. He goes out there and cites some other sources, and he provides some extra thoughtful analysis on the situation. Via rg.org, James Murphy reports a source claiming that the Boston Bruins are one of the multiple teams interested in St. Louis Blues defenseman Justin Faulk. According to Murphy on his RG.org article, Bruins GM Don Sweeney remains aggressive in his pursuit of a top-4 right-shot defenseman after losing out to the Vegas Golden Knights in the Rasmus Andersson sweepstakes. Other clubs believed to be pursuing Justin Faulk include the Montreal Canadiens, the Buffalo Sabres, Detroit Red Wings, Dallas Stars, and Utah Mammoth. However, the Blues have set a high asking price for the 33-year-old puck-moving defenseman. They seek a return comparable to what the Flames received from the Golden Knights in the Rasmus Andersson deal. Now that is a pretty big bombshell, I would say. Montreal, Detroit, Boston, Utah, Buffalo even, all interested in Justin Faulk? Dallas makes sense in my mind. They're a very good team, and if there's anybody that has a pretty good chance of making the third round and beyond, I'd say Dallas is right up in there with the best of the best. Montreal and Detroit are two teams that have been on the up and up for most of the year. They haven't really been all too great the past few seasons, but this could be a turning around year for the ages. The Buffalo Sabres are a lot better ever since they made their changes up top, and now they're super competitive. They want to capitalize on the success that they have just found for themselves, and they want to make a splash for their fans and for their players. The Utah Mammoth, on the other hand, are another one of these up-and-up teams. All of these teams make sense in my mind when it comes to wanting to get that boost, getting a guy to bolster up your roster and to add some extra elements on your power play. But Justin Faulk, the fact that he's 33 years old, automatically makes him a red flag, I would say, for a lot of fans of these younger teams. If you're looking at Montreal or Detroit, for example, I think it's fair if you're a fan of one of these teams and saying, yeah, well, Justin Faulk is 33 years old. Do you want to give up long-term assets for a guy that is pretty much at the tail end of his prime and whose contract expires in a summer anyway? You're not really sure if he's going to be sticking around after this season and the next one that comes and goes. But then again, the opposing perspective is Justin Faulk legitimately helps an NHL team get better. So if you are a Detroit or a Montreal and you want to have a splash, you don't just want to make the playoffs and get bounced in 6 games in the first round to a team that inevitably loses in the second round. If you actually want to make an impact, would Justin Faulk be a player that helps you do that in the short term? And is that the value that you're paying for, rather than the 33-year-old defenseman whose contract expires a year from now would make you assume? This is what the Spectre's note goes out there and says. The Flames, when they traded away Rasmus Andersson, they had received defenseman Zach Whitecloud, defense prospect Abraham Wiebe, a conditional first in 2027, which is top 10 protected, and a conditional 2028 second rounder, which would upgrade to a 2028 first if the Golden Knights win the Stanley Cup this year. Faulk has a remaining year in his contract with an average annual value of 6.5, but he'll be paid 4.5 in actual salary next year. He also has a 15-team no-trade list. Both factors could limit the number of potential trade destinations for Faulk, especially if the Blues aren't willing to retain salary. Convincing them to do so would mean giving up an additional asset in the deal. The Sabres, Red Wings, Stars, and Mammoth could use Faulk, but he wouldn't be a fit with the Canadiens. They have limited cap space at the trade deadline. The Habs also have Dobson, Goulet, and Carrier as their right-side defensemen, with Hudson capable of shifting from left to right if necessary. Goulet is a left-shot defenseman playing on the right, but they are not going to demote him or Carrier. The Canadiens have a right-side need, but it's for a scoring winger on their top line. Now, I do think it's interesting that Montreal is getting called out specifically as a team that does not need Faulk. And that has been a pretty fair narrative, I would say, to bring up here. When it comes to the Canadiens and their defense, they have a number of guys that can play both sides. They have a number of guys on the right as well. Noah Dobson and Carrier are more than passable options, and whomever it is that you're tasking to play those extra right side minutes, whether it's a Hudson or whomever, they've usually proven to be pretty standard and good in that role. So for Justin Faulk, is he really necessary? It does contradict the reporting that we had seen out of James Murphy that apparently the Montreal Canadiens are pursuing this guy. Does that make sense if you're a Canadiens fan? If you're a fan of these other teams, though, I know the Red Wings fan base will be tuning into this one. We've been talking about Detroit and Justin Faulk for a few weeks now. They need support on their right side. Hamonic is not good enough. JBD, he's solid once in a while, but he's not consistent enough. Axel Sandin-Pellikka is a rookie, and Mo Seider is being tasked with everything under the sun. You need extra stability there. And while Justin Faulk isn't necessarily the most defensively responsible guy who's going to go out there and really shut things down for the opposition, he's a player that at the very least can provide some minutes-eating play to allow Sandin-Pellikka to breathe a little bit more and allow Seider to get a little bit of that load taken off of his shoulders. So I'd say Detroit is a pretty reasonable fit. The Boston Bruins, I mean, I'm thinking about the fact that they just traded away some other defensemen, and now they could be looking for more. The Bees are kind of in an unprecedented territory in their timeline the past few years, so I think it is going to be really interesting to see how they navigate these next few weeks, whether or not they try to get a guy like Justin Faulk onto their team to help them make a playoff splash while they still have some of the guys that they have. With all that said, though, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. How do you feel about Justin Faulk, St. Louis Blues defenseman, and the idea that the Canadiens, Red Wings, Bruins, among others, are targeting him in a trade? I hope you enjoyed this video. And bye.